Critics spent the late 80s and 90s dismissing some of the most unsettling, subversive films ever made, calling them too dark, too weird, or just plain unmarketable. Audiences stayed away in droves, studios panicked over financial losses, and directors found themselves blacklisted for years. Decades later, these same bombs are studied in film schools and quoted endlessly online, proving that sometimes the best movies are the ones nobody wanted to see. Director Paul Verhoeven and cinematographer Joost Vacano stripped completely naked on set to convince the young cast to film Starship Troopers' co-ed shower scene, with Verhoeven later confirming to Empire magazine that while Vacano had grown up in German nudist camps and had no hesitation, he found it more difficult but necessary to give an example. The film follows high schooler Johnny Rico joining the mobile infantry to chase his girlfriend, only to get thrown into a brutal interstellar war against giant insects after an asteroid wipes out his hometown. The production was notoriously brutal, filmed in Wyoming's Hell's Half Acre, where temperatures hit over 100 degrees, with the cast requiring cool-down tents and constant medical monitoring for heat exhaustion. Michael Ironside suffered injuries during filming that required medical attention, and Casper Van Dien broke a rib riding a practical tanker bug rig, while a fight scene between him and Patrick Muldoon took 62 takes, with Muldoon accidentally dropping Van Dien on his head on take 59. The film cost $105 million and grossed only $54.8 million domestically, a catastrophic failure that ended Verhoeven's Hollywood blockbuster career and landed him in what the industry called movie jail. Critics accused him of promoting the neo-Nazi aesthetics he was parodying, with some calling him an actual fascist. And after the subsequent failure of Hollow Man in 2000, Verhoeven left America entirely and didn't direct another studio film for over 2 decades. Ray Liotta's performance as psychopath Ray Sinclair in Something Wild was so visceral that Jeff Daniels later admitted he was honestly a little scared of Liotta during physical scenes, particularly the brutal bathroom fight, and Martin Scorsese saw the film and was mesmerized by how Liotta could be charming one second and murderous the next, directly leading to his casting in Goodfellas. The film stars uptight investment banker Charles Driggs getting kidnapped by free-spirited Lulu for an impromptu road trip that turns into a terrifying thriller when they encounter her violent ex-convict husband Ray. Liotta was cast after Melanie Griffith urged director Jonathan Demme to see his audition, with the performance becoming so influential that film scholars point out a young Leonardo DiCaprio modeled his early tough guy mannerisms after Liotta, from the way he held cigarettes to his predatory lean during dialogue. Demme filled the background with guerrilla cameos from indie legends including directors John Sayles as a motorcycle cop and John Waters as a used car salesman, even casting his own mother and David Byrne's mother as thrift shop owners. The production was deeply connected to New York punk and new wave scenes, with the soundtrack featuring Oingo Boingo and Fine Young Cannibals, but this uber-hip approach made Orion Pictures nervous about marketing a movie that shifted from yuppie and peril comedy to bloody crime drama. Despite critical acclaim and a 92% Rotten Tomatoes score, the film barely broke even, grossing around $8 million on a $7 million budget, surviving solely through filmmaker reputation, and eventually becoming a Criterion Collection cornerstone for its influence on 90s indie cinema. During filming of Drop Dead Gorgeous, Denise Richards performed a romantic song while dancing with a life-size stuffed Jesus on a crucifix, causing local Minnesotans working as background extras to stand up and walk off set in protest after realizing they were part of a dark satire they hadn't been warned about. The film follows Sweet Trailer Park resident Amber Atkins competing in Minnesota's American Teen Princess pageant against wealthy rival Becky Lehman, whose former winner mother begins eliminating contestants through increasingly lethal accidents. Screenwriter Lona Williams was an actual pageant survivor who won Minnesota's Junior Miss in 1985 and went on to be national runner-up, writing the film as thinly veiled revenge against the world she escaped, even appearing on screen as the silent third judge watching chaos she lived through. The original title was Dairy Queens, but the corporation filed a massive lawsuit over a film featuring exploding tractors, teenage anorexia, and murderous stage moms associated with their brand, forcing a last-minute change to Drop Dead Gorgeous. Richards recalled in a 15th anniversary interview that the production had to scramble to fill empty seats, but the performance was so effectively terrible it achieved exactly what director Michael Patrick Jann wanted, with Richards leaning into the backlash. The film cost $15 million and grossed a dismal $10.6 million at the domestic box office, with director Michael Patrick Jann never directing another major feature film, and screenwriter Lona Williams largely disappearing from Hollywood. The studio wanted to polish it into a lighthearted teen romp like Clueless, but Jann and Williams refused to remove the cynical edge that saw contestants literally dropping dead. And it was only through the DVD era and a 2019 resurrection on streaming that the film's status shifted to cult classic, with Allison Janney noting fans recognize her for this more than almost anything else in her award-winning career. George Lucas desperately wanted to adapt the original Flash Gordon comic strips and approached producer Dino De Laurentiis to buy the rights, but De Laurentiis refused to sell them, insisting on producing the film himself with a more operatic vision, which directly led Lucas to write his own space mythos that became Star Wars. Flash Gordon follows star quarterback Flash Gordon, launched through a vortex to planet Mongo alongside travel agent Dale Arden and scientist Dr. Han Zarkov. Discovering mysterious energy attacks are the work of Emperor Ming, the Merciless, who destroys worlds out of sheer boredom. By the time production began with a massive $20 million budget, roughly double what the original Star Wars cost, De Laurentiis hired director Mike Hodges, known for gritty crime dramas like Get Carter, a choice Hodges himself admitted in a 2020 Guardian interview was perplexing. The most shocking part is that lead actor Sam J. Jones isn't really in the final movie, at least not vocally. After fighting with the producer over unpaid expenses and dangerous stunts during the UK shoot, Jones refused to return to London for voice work, so they brought in a professional voice actor to dub over roughly 75 to 90% of his lines. Following her breakout as Princess Aura, Ornella Muti was offered the lead Bond girl role of Melina Havelock in For Your Eyes Only, written specifically with her in mind. But negotiations imploded when Muti insisted her personal friend and costume designer, Wayne Finkelman, be hired to design her entire wardrobe, with producer Albert Broccoli refusing to bypass his established department heads and Muti walking away valuing creative partnership over the massive career boost. The film made only $27 million domestic on the $20 million budget, killing any immediate hopes for a sequel. Gary Oldman spent time in a Los Angeles bar recording the speech patterns of a man who spoke in a specific aggressive way, trying to sound black, using that real person as the foundation for his terrifying 10-minute performance as Pimp Drexel Spivey in True Romance. The film follows comic book store clerk Clarence Worley falling for call girl Alabama, then accidentally stealing a suitcase full of cocaine after killing her pimp, leading to a bloody chase across the country by Sicilian mobsters. Oldman worked with the makeup team to create the milky scarred eye and uncomfortable dental grills that affected how he ate and spoke on set, transforming so completely that Christian Slater didn't recognize him when he walked onto set for their confrontation scene. Brad Pitt's role as stoner roommate Floyd was originally more standard until Pitt asked Tony Scott for permission to make him a permanent couch fixture who never moves even when mobsters break in with shotguns, with the bong he used being a functional piece belonging to Scott's climbing partner. Producer Judd Apatow later revealed that watching Pitt as Floyd gave him the idea for Pineapple Express, wondering what would happen if you forced a character like that off the couch and on the run. The ending remains controversial because Quentin Tarantino's original script had Clarence dying in the final shootout, leaving Alabama alone with the money, but Scott fell in love with the characters and changed it to a happy ending, even filming both versions before Tarantino eventually agreed Scott was right for the tone he'd created. The film made only $12.2 million against a $13 million budget, not finding its cult audience until after Pulp Fiction made Tarantino a household name a year later. The original ending of Heathers featured the school actually exploding, followed by a prom in heaven where all the dead students attended together, with one version even having Veronica kill herself, saying now there's a school in heaven. The film stars Veronica Sawyer, growing weary of her cruel clique and meeting mysterious new student JD, whose pranks to humble the popular kids spiral into murders staged as suicides until he plans to blow up the entire school. Brad Pitt auditioned for JD, but was rejected because producers felt he was too nice and lacked the dark Jack Nicholson edge the character required, while Heather Graham's mother made her turn down the role of Heather McNamara because she found the script satanic and inappropriate. Winona Ryder had to fight for the role of Veronica after her management team begged her not to do it, claiming the ugly, mean-spirited script would destroy her career and telling her she wasn't pretty enough to play a popular girl. So she went to a department store for a complete makeover and demanded a screen test to prove them wrong. The film's initial performance seemed to validate their fears when it made only $1.1 million on a $3 million budget. During the cafeteria gun scene, the production used real blanks that were significantly louder than expected in the enclosed space, causing genuine startled reactions from extras and noise complaints from the school where they were filming. The line "I love my dead gay son" became a major fight with executives who wanted it cut for fear of offending audiences, but writer Daniel Waters and director Michael Lehman insisted it was the ultimate satire of adult hypocrisy and kept it in. Director Catherine Bigelow and producer James Cameron spent a full year engineering a custom lightweight 8-pound camera with remote-controlled focus that could be worn on a head rig for strange days, allowing operators to run and jump like real people for the immersive first-person playback sequences. The film stars ex-cop Lenny Nero, dealing illegal memory playback devices in pre-millennial Los Angeles, getting drawn into a conspiracy involving corrupt police and a murdered activist when he receives a snuff tape. The opening 3-minute continuous point-of-view robbery shot took days of rehearsal for every second of footage, with crew members hiding behind furniture to avoid being caught in frame, and if the camera operator tripped during the take, the entire setup had to be reset at tens of thousands of dollars per attempt. The production filmed guerrilla style in areas where police tension was still extremely high after the 1992 riots, taking over blocks of Los Angeles with thousands of extras for the New Year's Eve street party, with prop police cars being smashed while real officers stood feet away as hired security. Angela Bassett recalled the war zone set dressing was so convincing that locals would wander onto set, thinking a new riot had broken out, and Bigelow admitted she felt obligated to reflect the palpable anger she'd seen while helping with downtown cleanup after the Rodney King verdict. The film cost $42 million and grossed only $7.9 million domestically, a catastrophic failure that blacklisted Bigelow from big-budget filmmaking for 5 years until she pivoted to independent war dramas like The Hurt Locker. The marketing failed to explain the complex memory playback concept, and audiences were reportedly repulsed by the graphic violence and unflinching depiction of sexual assault recorded on tape, with the film used as a cautionary tale against dark sci-fi for an entire generation. Matthew McConaughey's famous 3-word catchphrase in Dazed and Confused was never in the script, improvised desperately on his first day when Richard Linklater told him to say something to girls in the next car, and McConaughey had been listening to Jim Morrison say "alright" 4 times on a Doors Live album. The film captures the last day of school in 1976 Austin as seniors celebrate graduation through hazing rituals and keg parties, with no central plot beyond wandering conversations and minor rebellions over one Texas night. He analyzed his character Wooderson's 4 passions: car, weed, rock and roll, and chicks, realized he had 3 of them with him in the moment, and used 3 all-rights to check them off in real time. With Linklater loving it so much, he expanded what was supposed to be a 2-week job into a career-defining performance. 3 of Linklater's real-life high school acquaintances, Bobby Wooderson, Andy Slater, and Richard Pink Floyd, filed a lawsuit in 2004 claiming the film caused them mental anguish and severe emotional distress by depicting them as pot-smoking juvenile delinquents, with the real Wooderson particularly upset. His name became synonymous with a creepy older guy who hangs with high school girls. A judge dismissed the case in 2005, citing the statute of limitations and obvious dramatization. The young cast, including Ben Affleck, Milla Jovovich, and Parker Posey, worked for almost nothing, some receiving checks as small as $25,000. And because the film wasn't a box office hit in 1993, making only $8.2 million, they saw no back-end profits for years. When the film became a massive home video hit, generating hundreds of millions for Universal, the actors received little to no residuals because of how their contracts were structured, with Jovovich so frustrated by her diminished role and low pay, she temporarily shifted focus to music before returning to film with The Fifth Element. The Matrix literally reused Dark City's physical sets because both films shot at Fox Studios Australia, with the rooftops where Trinity runs in the opening chase being the exact same rooftops where John Murdoch was chased by the Strangers a year earlier. Dark City follows Murdoch, waking with no memory in a city where the sun never rises, and reality shifts every midnight, discovering he possesses the same telekinetic powers as the pale beings hunting him. Director Alex Proyas spent months designing the shifting Gothic architecture, and when his film flopped, the sets remained standing in Sydney, allowing the Wachowskis to save money by using the pre-existing noir structures for their tight Matrix budget. New Line Cinema executives forced the addition of an opening narration by Kiefer Sutherland's character that explicitly explains the aliens and memory-swapping twist within the first 30 seconds, against the director's wishes, destroying the mystery he'd spent years crafting. The film cost $27 million and debuted at number 4 with only $14.4 million domestic, opening directly against Titanic in its 11th week, still dominating the number 1 spot. The marketing team tried selling it as standard horror when they didn't know how to explain a gothic noir sci-fi psychological thriller, and the ratings board gave it an R rating not for violence or language, but because it was deemed too weird for lower ratings. Kiefer Sutherland saw the role of Dr. Schreiber as a desperate chance to reinvent himself during a career slump, playing the character with frantic wheezing and stuttering inspired by Peter Lorre, insisting on an uncomfortable physical gait that made him look smaller and more pathetic. Some crew members worried he was overacting, but the director supported the bizarre choice. And while the film's failure did little for Sutherland, initially, the performance proved his range and eventually led to his casting as Jack Bauer in 24, just a few years later. Robert De Niro whispered vile anti-Semitic slurs at Jerry Lewis during filming of The King of Comedy to elicit a genuinely angry reaction, with Lewis later confirming in his autobiography and a 2002 interview that the insults were genuinely vicious and hurtful, not acting. The film follows delusional basement-dwelling comedian Rupert Pupkin, who believes he's best friends with late-night host Jerry Langford after one brief encounter, eventually kidnapping the host to ransom his way onto the show. The tactic worked exactly as intended, capturing real hatred and shock on Lewis's face, though Lewis admitted the experience left the set feeling incredibly cold and hostile. Even after De Niro apologized and explained it was the only way to break through his polished performer exterior. The production was notoriously grueling, with Martin Scorsese demanding up to 50 takes for simple line deliveries, which Lewis found exhausting and redundant coming from the one-and-done era of comedy, suffering a serious heart attack shortly after filming wrapped. The film cost $19 million and made a dismal $2.5 million at the domestic box office, one of the lowest-grossing wide releases for a major director in the 80s. Scorsese struggled to secure funding for his next project for years, essentially told by studio executives that he was out of touch with what audiences wanted, and it took over a decade for the film to be reassessed as ahead of its time regarding reality TV and fame for being famous culture.